I was an IV heroin addict when I was 15 years old. You know, starting at that point in time up until almost the time I got sober, I never thought I was going to have a long life. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to go to prison for an incredibly long time, which by all means I should have if the cards had played out that way. But they didn't. You know, so no, I never thought that I would ever, the idea of doing what I've done with my life was never even a thought. The idea of ever even living just a normal life, job, wife, kids, just normalcy, was so far-fetched to me that I never thought that would happen. Probably 210 pounds now. I'm 135, 140 pounds at the time. I got track marks up and down both arms. My physical appearance looked like and screamed that, you know, probably said loudly that heroin is all this guy cares about. The withdrawals are coming up against me, and I've told every lie that I had to tell. I ran out of lies, I ran out of hustles, I burnt everybody. Even most of the drug addicts didn't want to hang out with me or trust me to do any business. And I robbed a kid, and I robbed him with a knife, and I knew the gig was up. And I took the money that I had robbed him for, and I met the dope man, and I was in a shooting gallery, hiding in the closet, doing, God willing, what was my last bit of heroin. The last shot of heroin I'd ever done and ever will do, and I was on the phone calling back to my family begging for help. Treatment and recovery support for the very small percentage of people that are ever going to get the opportunity to get help, and then the percentage of those that are going to stay sober, that's great. It's my life's work. It's what I do day in, day out, 7 days a week. On Christmas, on New Year's, on Thanksgiving, I'm still doing it. I'm still working, right? And it saves lives, but it doesn't get ahead of the problem. We're expecting the government to fix a problem that none of us even have the answer to. I work in the treatment industry. I have 5 facilities. We have 195 beds. I have about 160 of the most qualified treatment professionals and dedicated, passionate people you could ever meet. And you could sit us all in the room and say, how do we beat this thing? And if we were honest, we'd tell you, I don't know. I know how to treat it. I know how to get sick people well. But how do we stop the problem from happening? I don't know.
Hello, my name's Dan. Nice to meet you. Ooh, bad start. I didn't realize Brady would do that. It's, I don't really know what the date is. I forgot. It's like the, Saturday something, May 11th. I don't know. Anyway, it's been a while since I made a video. I don't really know why it's been a while since I made a video. Can't touch this.
I think it's really important that we hear from and listen to the voices of people who are in long-term recovery, people who made some very hard choices and who can help others as well as help those of us who are trying to be leading on this effort as well. And that brings me to Sandi Coyle, the Engagement Director for New Futures. Sandi, will you share your story, please?
So here I am driving down to Northeast Philadelphia and knowing all the corners and blocks of where I could get dime bags, where I could get coke, where I could get heroin, where I could get crack. And I'm feeling totally like in place, like driving down to these street corners and stopping and asking these guys, like, hey, can I get a bag? I had no business being there. It's like, well, I don't have a needle in my arm, and you know, like, I'm here going to school, I'm working, and can't be so bad. School just got to be too much, and my drug use started to ramp up. I mean, it didn't take me long to go full steam, because now I was out of school and I was waitressing, and I thought, well, maybe I should start pointing in the direction of trying to find myself a career. And so I actually got a job at a child care center, and it was a really short-term job, but there were 2 times within that job during nap time, kids would all be laying there, and I would go in the bathroom and I would snort a line, and it was supposed to be cleaning the room while the kids were sleeping, and I would basically just be doped up sitting against the wall. I quickly started to realize that there was something wrong, that my drug use was starting to make choices for me.
We're also joined this morning by Sandi Coyle, a friend of the show, the executive director of Granite Pathways and the director of recovery services for FedCap. And she's also spearheading a construction of a safe harbor recovery center in the city of Portsmouth. Hi, Sandi. How are you?
Good morning.
Why is it so bad in New Hampshire? Have we identified what the factors are that makes it so bad in New Hampshire? Sure. Not that it doesn't happen in other places.
Sure. So I think you hit the nail on the head, though. This is a national crisis. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not alone in terms of the number of deaths. Mm-hmm. Granted, we're higher and our percentages is higher. Mm-hmm. I think part of the problem has been fentanyl.
When it comes to choosing to or doing this drug, opioids or whatever, and now it becomes more about fentanyl, and fentanyl is killing more people, or that's that correct? Fentanyl correct. Is actually killing people. When you go to buy drugs from someone, you don't know what they're giving you. And am I correct in saying that people are dying because what they're using they think is heroin when actually it's fentanyl, and that's, what is it? How many more times more deadly?
50 times.
50 times more deadly, and you don't know what you're getting.
It's 50 times more deadly because it's 50 times more potent than heroin.
Right.
Which is, the fentanyl in the last 2 to 3 years has started to make a presence in the opiate scene, whereas since the late 90s, people have been addicted, and kind of when the suburban heroin addict was born.
Right.
But it's not the opiate epidemic that got the attention of the media and the politicians and everyone else. It's the body count. The amount of people that are dying and how that's skyrocketing year to year, and that's a direct relation to fentanyl. Because now, when you're a heroin addict, you're opening a bag of dope. That may be heroin, or that may be laced with fentanyl or pure fentanyl.
Right.
And a lot of the deaths that we're seeing are people that thought they were doing heroin but weren't. They tested the bag after they passed, and it was purely fentanyl. So they thought they were doing the potency of 1 dose, and they did 50 and died before they even knew it.
There is realities that it affects everybody. Some of my friends are dead that did not grow up in poverty. Some of my friends are still in a place where they're still using. Like, we're number 1 when it comes to fentanyl overdoses in the country. We're number 2 when it comes to opioid overdoses. And from what I've heard from the DEA, they've considered this like ground zero. So we have it's fair to say it's a pretty significant problem here that's happening in our own community in this state. And ultimately, why this is important to this bigger idea of this opioid crisis is because that is a poverty problem. That's why. So that's where we are connected. So we're not directly saying we want to get kids off of drugs. We're saying we want to get them out of poverty, which a lot of that has to do. That's where you see a high saturation of that. It's only now getting national attention because kids in the suburbs are now getting high. This is not something this is not different. This has been in the hood and all these different impoverished neighborhoods. This has always been the case. Drug overdoses, drug addiction, drugs in general. If you tackle the poverty problem, you're not going to tackle the entire nut, but you're going to tackle a big part of it. These people that are getting on drugs outside of poverty, well, we got to make sure we deal with this because we're losing talent. See, when you attach it to money, everyone cares. It behooves us to take care of the ones in poverty, at least create an environment where we're focusing on that, because at the end of the day, we're all paying for it. This is called economic development, is what it's called. You know, you get your head wrapped around, I'm paying for this anyway, whether it's through my mortgage payment, that's escrowed, or my taxes, or, you know, I can actually put something towards it as a community-focused thing to then solve it. Either way, we're gonna pay. The question is, how long do you want to pay for?
So this is me at work, super glamorous job as an assistant bank manager. We have these things called FC call nights, where we've got to get appointments to the financial consultant, and then we have to go on this conference called report how well we did, as well as sending like an Excel spreadsheet tracker. Oh, I look terrible, the light up there. So I'm just waiting on hold for my regional manager. It's really thrilling, announcing the results in front of everyone. I love it. It's like the favorite part of my week.
Started the meeting. Please wait. If you are the moderator, please enter your PIN now.
I'll check in
Press
later.
the star key
I know it's been a
before
few days.
and
It's
after.
like Tuesday the 28th of April. I think he's not a bad guy. I just think he's a novice manager, and will get better as the years go on. Or maybe he's had bad managers before. I don't know, because I've worked with Darren, and his old manager, and Darren's a legend. I mean, he's a great guy. Oh boy. Anyway, heroin. Yeah, so I haven't taken it in about a week now. Isn't that great? Yeah. Don't really want to do it anymore, but I don't know. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's tricky, you know, it's like, I'm sure you can tell when I've taken it, just like how, like, kind of spaced out I am. And that's like, what I like about it is that it's a downer, you know, you take it and you just, all your problems are still there, but they just don't matter so much anymore.
Good morning. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of 2 substance abuse treatment programs in New Hampshire and have a 3rd opening up early next year. I'm also in long-term recovery from opiate and other drug addiction. I've been sober since December 7th of 2006. I'd like to share some of my personal experience with opiate addiction. Just a picture of me. I was probably 17 years old, a few years into addiction, gearing up to go kick some doors in, rob drug dealers. The days of heroin being an inner city stereotype fitting drug and culture are over. Mm-hmm. You know, and we, my generation, my crowd here in New Hampshire, we were like the pioneers of that stuff. You know, what unleashed, truly, you know, and the funny thing is we were no different than generations before us. I talked to my father, who's a successful business guy, lived a good life, paid his taxes, owned a small company in construction, respected member of his community, been there his whole life. And was there any difference between me and him growing up? I ended up a heroin addict. He ended up a business guy. The only difference is for his generation, what they were messing around with was a little bit of LSD, some Quaaludes, pot, booze, maybe a little cocaine was pretty serious. But none of that stuff has a fraction of the grabbing power that opiates do. So when he messed around with Quaaludes as a teenager and LSD and had a little fun, and then he met my mother and he went to college and he grew up. There's no growing up out of heroin addiction. What started as recreational use quickly turned into daily use and addiction. My tolerance for the drug became increasingly stronger. I dropped out of high school and shortly after graduated into using heroin, as most opiate addicts do. Before I knew it, it was too late. Through 6 years of opiate addiction, I did and experienced many things I'm not proud of. I committed crime to support my habit, got in legal trouble, was homeless, I've overdosed 5 times, and it was a general burden on society. I attempted to achieve recovery many times before I finally did, but on the morning of December 7th, 9 years ago, I was done for good. I had no idea the decision I made was going to play out the way it did. I had no clue. I thought another pill, we're partying, and, you know, pretty aware that I probably shouldn't be doing the stuff that I was doing, but I was a teenager and we do all sorts of stuff that we're not supposed to be doing, you know, and fast forward a little bit and the oxys are unavailable, they're too expensive, your habit builds, and someone comes with a bag of dope, and you're sick. You're in withdrawal. That's painful. And that bag of dope's gonna stop it. So I sniffed the bag of dope, which is 10 times cheaper and more powerful than the oxys. And all of a sudden I'm better. I'm never gonna shoot it though. I crossed that one line. When it was oxys and I got strung out and I started seeing people doing heroin, I'm never gonna do heroin. And then the disease progresses and catches up on you. And then, all right, man, this one time I'll sniff that bag of dope because I can't get the oxys. Once you sniff the bag of dope and you spend a fraction of the money for a better high, and it's more economical, really, you're not going back. And then what happens is the cycle starts all over again, whereas my tolerance to sniffing heroin built and built and built. And as the culture around me, because water seeks its own level, some people are starting to turn to the needle. And my habit grows, and I'm watching these guys get high off a $10 bag when it's taken me 100 to get to the same place. And the powerlessness is there, and I'll try it. And it's over. And the delusion around that was a choice, or that was a string of bad choices, it's just that, it's a delusion. There was no string of bad choices. I had no choice. That's addiction. That's the definition of addiction, is the lack of the power to choose. So the truth is, I made one bad decision, unknowingly get myself into what I got into.
My girlfriend and I were driving home from Philadelphia. It was probably 3 o'clock in the morning. And at this point, I think we had a lot of paraphernalia on us, and we got pulled over that night. So I was driving my mom's car, and her license plate was all messed up. So they pulled us over, And when he pulled us over, my girlfriend jumped out of the front and started running. And I was just sitting there left with the police officer, and he took me out of the police car, and he found immediately the bags of dope in my pockets, and he arrested us that night. I was 19 years old. I just graduated I'd been out of high school for less than a year, and nobody had any idea of the drug use that was happening. And what really put me over the edge was that morning when we got back, my girlfriend said, "They got all our dope. We have to go back and get more." And it just didn't sit with me. And so I went home and I told my mom, and I don't think she really wanted to believe me. She didn't want to hear any of it. And so I was fortunately stuck at my mom's house, which was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't have a car. And I ended up physically withdrawing from heroin by myself for 3 days. I was just violently ill, shaking, sweating, hallucinating for 3 days. I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't drink anything. My mind, my skin was crawling, my head was crawling, my head was talking. On that third night, I remember the first thing I was finally able to drink and hold down was orange juice. And I had this blanket over me, just, going between sweating and freezing. And towards the end of that, about the third day, I called the police department and I called the officer that had arrested me, and I just, I said, "Thank you, I think you've saved my life."
I've arrested some people and they said thank you, because if I didn't end up in the backseat of your car, I may be dead, or I may be doing something that, would keep me in jail forever. And you hear that and you're like, oh yeah, cool. And then you think about it later and you're like, wow, powerful. That's certainly not you don't always think that's the intended effect or the result of an arrest. Sometimes you're like, ah, crap. Sorry, man, but, X's and O's is how it plays out. And then you have someone tell you that, that's huge.
I'm real kind of conflicted about drugs and alcohol and things, because I mean, you know, you can take something and it just makes, like, you still know what's going on. You know, I still know that I've got problems, but, like, it just, like, puts it on the back burner, you know? Like, all the time, my brain is like this freaking, like, conference room of people yelling at each other, all different things, and it's changing constantly. And then you just know that there's something, and it's just gonna silence it, and you can just be yourself and smile. And I mean, like, why wouldn't you want that? But of course I don't want to be, you know, a drug addict. It's like, I mean, for many reasons. I mean, I don't really think that I need to go into, like, why I don't want to be a drug addict. Because it would, I mean, if it's possible to ruin my life anymore, it would ruin my life more.
As we all know, the heroin and substance abuse crisis that we are facing is, in fact, the most pressing public health and safety challenge that we face.
One of the things that has really moved me the most as governor is the number of people who are in recovery who have been willing to speak about it publicly.
Next, I'd like to introduce Dean Lemire, who is going to talk about the importance of promoting recovery to anybody. Dean is a New Hampshire resident in long-term recovery who just joined the state's public health network as a prevention coordinator. Dean?
Anyone, anytime, can recover. My name is Dean Lemire, and I'm a person in long-term recovery from heroin and alcohol addiction. Picking up a needle and injecting a mysterious brown substance that I don't actually know what's in it into my arm while driving down the highway with people looking into my car with, like, blood streaming down to my shoes. Like, that's not reasonable.
It was Mother's Day, and I went out to lunch with my mom, and that's the day I chose to tell her I couldn't stop shooting heroin, you know. She thought that I was, like, you know, my problem was alcohol and I was sober, and I laid that bomb on her. So she started calling around for state-funded stuff, and there's not a lot. But the one that seemed most likely was right in our backyard. I had no idea. But it was in high demand. There was a 3-week waiting list, so I'm calling 3 times a day for 3 weeks to get into this place. I had a history of, you know, stealing my grandfather's prescription pills, you know, his oxycodones, you know, for years, off and on. Somehow, you know, in my head, it seemed completely reasonable. I need to stop drinking, I need to stop collecting DWIs and getting arrested and causing all these external problems. But I need to get something in me, you know. I'm gonna start shooting heroin.
So I thought of the one kid on my, you know, in my wide, my much, you know, kind of 6th degree Kevin Bacon, like, I've heard that this kid who knows of me has tried heroin. That is the rumor. So I Facebook messaged him and said, hey, no icebreaker, you know, I heard you might be able to get something, and all he needed was somebody to drive. So we drove down to Mass and every day thereafter. And he's dead now.
I hit 2 bridges and then I'm almost there.
Just know that you're not alone. Because I know that I felt like I was all alone in my addiction, you know, and I didn't even know what it meant to be an addict, you know. I didn't know there was another side to it. And obviously there is, you know. We're about to join like 50,000 other people at least who aren't hating life anymore, aren't feeling lonely.
Hey Dean, hi. How's the driving going?
It's perfect, man. We're halfway there. We all still like each other, I think. It's hard to tell, I'm up front. But I think everyone's still sober.
Yeah?
So to all the naysayers out there,
would you say that this is any
I'd
length?
never get here.
Would you say that this is taking any length for recovery?
This is half length so far.
Okay, half length. Half measure.
I gotta pee.
That's one of our house managers right there.
Does it give you hope?
Yeah, man. Loaded with hope. First day I was there was rough, but I'm loving it now.
Don't shut me out, don't hold me down. I'm right here, I'll be around. I'm paying my way, I'm paying my way. Some days
I just woke up. We got here at like 5 something. Let me tell you, I'm already loving it.
I thought it'd be more dramatic.
I'll tell you how excited I am to be here right now. I am amazed to see how many of you, how we are making our voices heard, that people with substance abuse disorders and people in recovery can change this conversation. Public opinion and public policy can only change when people affected by this disorder organize themselves and put a face and a name to this disease.
More Americans now die every year from drug overdoses than they do in car crashes. All of this takes a terrible toll on too many families and too many communities all across the country.
I'm Zach, and I'm a heroin addict, and I haven't done heroin in 2 months.
If I'd known that like my brain would be fried from using drugs all this time, dude, at 19, and I can't remember things like the way I used to, dude, I probably would have not used drugs. You know, it gets hard. Like my mind is like fried, completely fried from doing it. Like I don't remember shit. And I don't think about crap. You know, like it's just how it is. You know, like if I knew, like, yeah, I would have done a lot of things differently, to be honest, if I knew in advance, like, where life would have taken me. Like, if I had known picking up one joint after having 2 years of sobriety would have led me to the path that I had gone down for the last year, like, I wouldn't have picked up that joint, you know, because it led me to heroin.
Anyway, so of course, like, I don't handle these situations very well. So, like, I didn't want to come across like a lunatic and keep ringing her, calling her. So instead of that, I thought like, oh, you know what, what's going to calm me down? I'm like, let's drink some gin and do a big fat line of heroin. So now I'm kind of like messed up myself. I want to take a fuckload of heroin and get drunk. And that's what you're looking at right now. It's a mess. I don't want to work tomorrow. Anyway. God, what a fucking retard I am. Huh. Anyway, bye.
A few years ago, I was looking at some of the addicts in my life who I love and trying to figure out if there was some way to help them. And I realized there were loads of incredibly basic questions I just didn't know the answer to. The core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because it's too hard or too painful. And if we want people, we want to bring addicts back to us. And that was one of the main motivations for all the research I did. I wanted to figure out how I could bring the people I love who had addiction problems back to me. Once you understand that pain and isolation are the major drivers of addiction, you see the madness of inflicting more pain and more isolation on them. If suffering was the solution to addiction, there would be no addicts, right? There wouldn't be any anywhere. What haven't they suffered? What don't they go through? They get humiliated and shamed, and they lose their families, and they lose their dignity, and they lose their sense of self-respect. Who thinks they need more? Who are these people who think they need more suffering? That's the thing that will what's the theory? Wake them up.
addiction so powerful that we use no matter what. You threaten me, I'm going to prison, I'm still using. You want to take my kids? I'm still using. Family's going to turn their back on me, I'm still using. Going to be homeless? I'm still using. None of it matters. That's how powerful this is. None of it matters.
Once I started using heroin, I think my life there was no coming back from that. I slept in places that were like covered in dog shit and bugs, and put myself in situations that just don't make sense, like where I was around scary men doing scary things, and all just so I could use. And I had no one that I could turn to and say, help me. And I didn't even have the desire to get help because I just didn't think it was worth it. It was all about, shooting up. It didn't matter if, I was shooting up with someone I didn't know, if I was gonna die, if I was gonna get a disease, if someone was gonna kill me. And every day would be about waking up and trying to figure out what we were gonna do to use.
Heather Levitt, and I was recently released from the state women's prison in Goffstown, New Hampshire. And I would ask why this panel of representatives does not have anyone from the Department of Corrections, where people are sent for addiction-related crimes. I survived through that prison system and searched for every available resource to me and took advantage of what was there. There were many women who did not even realize that they were valuable enough to search for resources. They did not think they were worth it. And as I sat there every week of the past 10 months, someone either overdosed or died days after they left that facility. Those were my peers, those were my classmates, people who took relapse prevention with me, people who slept in a bunk next to me for a year.
And a lot of women don't feel the value in themselves or in recovery. Like they don't know, all they see is despair and fear and the loss of children and the loss of life, and none of those things can keep you sober. My older daughter she's 16, and she super disappointed, and I get it. I validate her feelings, and I keep writing, and she talked to me a few times, and it went well, and then I did that interview, and I think she got scared, honestly. I think part of her is maybe ashamed, but mostly I think she's scared because she didn't know about the heroin and stuff. Like, she didn't know, and I think that's just my take on it. Like, also how many times can you promise that you won't do it again? I think that shows that what they're doing isn't working, and not the addicts. I'm talking about government and about the Department of Corrections. That many people are put in jail for committing crimes, either, selling drugs so that they can use drugs, or stealing, or some sort of crime relative to their addiction. I left the prison, I'm not allowed to talk to my counselor, I'm not allowed to get any help. All the volunteers that came in for AA, did my step work with me, can't speak to me. That doesn't make sense. Like, I walked through that into a life full of hope. And those people that helped me, that made me feel valid, like that I could do it myself, that being willing, taking suggestion was the right way to go, and now they can't talk to me, like, that doesn't make sense.
The one thing you can say in defense of the war on drugs is we've given it a fair shot. The United States has spent 100 years, $1 trillion, and killed hundreds of thousands of people in the name of the war on drugs. And at the end of all that, we can't even keep drugs out of our prisons, where we pay someone to walk around the walled perimeter the whole time. We are never, ever going to keep drugs out of the United States. We haven't even succeeded in significantly reducing the supply of those drugs. That doesn't work. What does work is taking that money that we have put into a big pile and burned for 100 years, and instead spending it on turning addicts' lives around, on loving them and supporting them. That policy has been tried, right? It's nothing hypothetical, it's not theoretical. It's what actually happened in the United States in a lot of places before we banned drugs and worked pretty well. And it's what they're doing in lots of countries. And we can now compare those places, right? We can compare, we can, there's a real world experiments going on and the results are really consistent, and they're not small, right? After Portugal moved from punishment to full decriminalisation and love and ending stigma and turning people's lives around, there was a 50% fall in injecting drug use. After Switzerland legalised drugs and moved away from stigma and punishment to a policy based on love, compassion and support, heroin overdose deaths ended. They don't happen now on legal heroin. Again and again, wherever you see these experiments being tried, you see a really significant change. So we can carry on giving into our natural but worse instincts, and we'll carry on getting the results we've got now. Things will stay as bad or they'll get worse. We can carry on like that if we want to. We know what the results will be.
Faster? Yeah.
Prohibition is causing certainly many more problems than it solves. It's like, as a principle, we want to be a sober society. And so for the person who's going to turn to those illicit substances, that makes them immediately a criminal, which gives them a really warped sense of self and gives them more of a reason to continue down that pathway without ever seeking help. And so people are really, really banged up. Generally, the people I see are really, really banged up by the time they surface and say, I want help. There is no reason that that call for help, that surrender, I want help, has to happen on the other side of an overdose. But because the activity is illegal, people are not going to be asking for help. The fact that heroin, fentanyl are illegal, you can face a huge minimum sentence for possessing either. Even the syringe with heroin residue is enough to keep somebody from accessing the help they need. I literally could not tell you exactly why I put a needle in my arm the first time. I needed relief from pain. That's the short of it. But I was a reasonable college graduate. Drank a lot, but there was you wouldn't look at my life and say that kid's gonna put a needle in his arm. I'm way more interested in offering hope, tapping into somebody else's hope, thinks that they're hopeless, Every person who's experiencing addiction has one of these inside them, begging to get out. You know what I mean? And we gotta tap into that, but we can't do that with a hammer. We don't do that. You're in jail. Hit me with a hammer. Stop. Stop with the addiction.
Dad. We have fun. Let's do some more.
Where there's support and services and love and understanding, that's when, rates of relapse go down, the length of relapse gets shorter, use of emergency services goes down. It's like when that support exists in the community and is accessible, it's almost like problem solved.
I don't really know if there's a way to describe being high on heroin or China White. It's just nice, you know? You're like, why doesn't everyone do this all of the time? But, you know, I think like drugs and drugs laws is just sort of bullshit really anyway, aren't they, you know? How many people do you think died in alcohol-related incidents last year? Now, how many people do you think died from marijuana-related instances last year? How many people do you think died from tobacco, or their lives were seriously impacted by tobacco last year? But it's a lot more than those people that died from taking heroin. I'm just saying, it's just,
Honestly, I think that the biggest change that needs to happen is in the honesty of the solution. You know, we're all over the news, we're in an epidemic, and it's kind of like when I was in addiction and then I got sober and I needed everybody to think that I was doing everything right. So my focus was on getting an apartment and a job and making everything look really glossy, but underneath was still really messy. I still had a lot of pain and suffering. I still, you know, had behaviors. That's sort of like the government and the politicians and the news. Like they come out with this big message that everything's getting better and they're trying so hard, and the solution isn't punishment, it's treatment, and New Hampshire is doing so much to make sure that everyone's okay, but it's not true. Like I told you, my experience with my overdose when I was treated so poorly, and the big concern was who sold me the drugs, not how I was. There was no information given to me about treatment. There was no person that made me feel like they were happy that I was alive. I was basically a burden during that whole experience. I felt like a piece of dirt, and that didn't make me want to stay sober. That made me want to die. It made me want to use again. And then, you know, through my experience with probation and parole and begging for help and getting sent back to prison multiple times, that's not the message that the community is receiving. They're getting a message that is dishonest. And I think that in order for people to get better, we actually truly need to invest in the solution and have long-term treatment. And these people who are sending the message of recovery, who aren't living in recovery, aren't accountable for the things they're not doing. You know, you can watch the news and hear about all these programs. Where are they? I can't get into one.
Joining us this morning from Manchester, New Hampshire is Tim Rourke, who is the chair of the New Hampshire Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, here to talk about the heroin addiction problem across the country, but specifically in New Hampshire and how it's playing out in this primary cycle. Mr. Rourke, let's begin with the problem in New Hampshire. Describe it.
You know, we have the highest growing incarceration rate in the United States, and it is entirely driven by untreated addiction. It's because we have addicts who aren't getting treatment, who are then engaging in criminogenic behavior that's landing them in prison. We have incarcerated men and women who are coming out into the community, who desperately need community supports to maintain their sobriety so that they don't reoffend, but they don't exist. So they cycle in and out of that system.
People just need to realize that, you know, addiction is a health issue, you know, and people need help. They need to be rehabilitated. They need to be given options to help them come off the drug. I can tell you when I talk to people, I'm very candid with people. I say, you know, even post-arrest at an incident, I'll ask them, say, hey, would you mind if I ask you some questions about, you know, your addiction? It has nothing to do with, you know, why I'm here. It's not gonna affect you in the rest. I just wanna know. And I don't think a single person has told me that they enjoy being addicted to heroin, that they wanna be addicted to heroin.
law enforcement came to me even before I was inaugurated as governor to say that this was a problem that they were seeing in all of our communities, that they knew, in their words, they couldn't arrest their way out of this problem, that people needed treatment, that we needed to get the word out, particularly to young people, but also to people who might, again, get addicted to lawful prescription drugs and then turn to heroin.
The fact that all these people are, shining a spotlight on people in recovery and asking their opinions on stuff, it really highlights the fact that there is no top-down approach to this particular problem, which is addiction, which is a very old problem, but has a new face today.
If there is to be a silver lining in all of this, it is the catalyzation of people with lived experience. For too long, people in recovery said nothing. And that for many, many years, that 12-step tenet of anonymity was misunderstood to really create a culture in the recovery community where you were basically discouraged from disclosing your status.
A year ago, I watched the movie Anonymous People, and it changed my life. And there's this whole idea of advocacy with anonymity. I just felt like these walls, like these bricks were just like crumbling down around me. And I went home that night, I couldn't sleep, and I'm just journaling like, I have to help, I can help. I've been ashamed of this. I've been keeping this a secret because I've felt just as bad about my recovery as I do about my drug use. There's less than a dozen people, including my closest friends and family, that know I've been sober and living an active life in recovery for over 9 years. And I think it's going to take people in recovery to show a message of hope, to show kind of the afterlife of this. Because there is one, the 19-year-old girl that struggled with addiction and did heroin, and she was suffering, there's a lot of emptiness and darkness there.
And I actually took quite a lot of heroin. And it's still hitting me. And it'll probably keep on going for another few minutes. At which point, I'll either sort of wake up in a or wake up in a hospital or a jail cell or something.
Well, the last time I saw you guys, I was in treatment at the Antrim House and looking for a longer-term transitional living facility to get into, which did happen pretty quickly, actually. I got a 2-week additional scholarship at Antrim, and then I was literally on my way to a 6-month program at Headrest in Lebanon when I was arrested on an outstanding parole violation for failure to get proper address change and failure to complete treatment. So in the midst of traveling from one treatment center to the next, I was picked up and brought to the Merrimack County Jail to wait for the prison to pick me up. This is my 5th time in 2 years. I've never had a write-up here. I haven't committed any new crimes. I have an illness. It's pretty severe, but a lot of people have it, and there is, solution-based treatment. It just isn't provided here. And half of this prison is full of women with the same exact issue. Why can I sit in here and be okay and talk to you guys and share my story? And the reason is that I wish somebody had done that for me. If I just sat there and resigned myself to the fact that I'm a drug addict and there's no other way, then I would be among the dead, and I don't want that. And I don't want that for other people because there's too many people that don't care already.
There's hope for everyone. You can show me drug addicts as bad as I was, you won't find one worse. At one point in my life, 8.5 years ago, I was a burden to society. I ate up your tax dollars. I was one of those incarcerated guys. I was the guy that if I was walking down the street in Manchester or any other of these towns in our state and you saw me, you would walk to the other side of the street to avoid me. It was that bad. You know, one look, I was clearly a drug addict. And it cost the state a lot of money. My sobriety and my recovery was the platform in which I became a positive influence in society, a taxpayer, and created jobs. Look at the power that happens when these people that you stereotype and you lump into those people, and we get sober and we get in recovery. You know, we can do anything we want. We can give lip service to it all day long. And if we could build treatment centers on good intentions and rallies, we'd be one of the best outfitted states in the country. You know, there are tons of amazing people, a lot of them, if not most of which I know personally, that are doing amazing work, advocating for more treatment, advocating for more prevention and recovery services. But someone actually needs to do that. Like, this isn't, the big stopper is funding, but let's not get caught up on the funding piece. Do we need funding? Absolutely. But what are you gonna do with that? What's next?
We had no intention of wanting to kind of jump in this game at all. But now we realize, I don't know if we have a choice in the matter. Because I mean, two options. One, you can watch what's happening and say, we don't know what to do. Or we can step in and say, we'd like to help. What we realized is we wanted to step in the space of prevention. Prevention is as far as when it comes to poverty. How do we engage in that and try to create a pathway for people to get out of it? Because now what you're talking about is you just tapped into legacy. When you talk about prevention, you're talking about engaging a next generation, now you're talking about legacy. So all that to say, we said, you know what? I think we're gonna be reaching out to kids. So I'm not a youth, I don't have a passion for kids or a passion for youth, but it felt as though, well, this is what we have to do. We kind of asked around and felt like this program that we want to run is pretty unique in nature. And so we started Grassroots promoting it. We spent a couple months putting out flyers and stuff like that. And we ran it through the summer. Tons of kids showed up. I don't know how to explain it. We had a reach of maybe over 260 teens that came. They didn't come in on buses. They weren't, manipulated to come. They just showed up. And we've been having fun, and we've been engaging with them, and we want to do our part to help out in any capacity. And so that's really where this youth program, I think, is going to be helping kids understand their truest potential, and where we feel as though we can leave true legacy to create a space where we're going to get kids where they need to go.
I found my little niche where I can just be out loud about everything I've ever been through. In fact, I consider it my civic duty to do so, so that some people can see a face of recovery that they haven't seen before. Oh my God, some heroin addicts don't just drop dead. For as many people that are, angry about the situation and want to help people with addiction in our state, there's just as many out there who truly believe that overdose is the cure for opiate addiction. And yet that attitude is out there, and I think that attitude is in our legislature.
This is the headline, There's Hope, which was really nice to wake up to. However, the online version that went out the day before, what was it? Heroin Addict Plans Recovery Center. And when that headline kind of pulled up on the screen, it really felt like it just smacked me in the face. And I hadn't hadn't ever heard myself referred to as heroin addict. And I knew that this headline was out on Facebook and social media, and the first thing that came to my mind, honestly, was my 10-year-old son, and what were people gonna think when I was walking into this school to pick him up, and they now know me as heroin addict. That feeling, that moment of shame and isolation and the reality or the harshness of the stigma that's around heroin addiction would better help me in the work that I'm doing to try and create pathways to recovery. And that's my message, my message isn't that I'm an ex-heroin addict and look at me and you can be a great ex-heroin addict too. My message is there is hope, and there is life that can be very meaningful no matter what your past.
The old idea of addiction that we all have in our heads about it being caused by the chemical hooks comes in part from a series of experiments that were done earlier in the 20th century. You get a rat and you put it in a cage and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water and the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. If you do that, the rat will almost always prefer the drugged water and almost always kill itself. You might remember the famous Partnership for Drug-Free America advert in the 80s that depicted this experiment.
Only one drug is so addictive, 9 out of 10 laboratory rats will use it until dead.
As Alexander came along, we looked at this experiment and said, well, hang on a minute. We're putting these rats in an empty cage. So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically heaven for rats. Anything a rat can want in life, it's got in Rat Park. It's got loads of friends, it can have loads of sex, it's got loads of cheese, it's got loads of coloured balls, it's got loads of tunnels, and they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drugged water. But this is the fascinating thing. They all try both the water bottles because they don't know what's in them. In Rat Park, they don't like the drugged water. They almost never use it. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. When animals or humans are in environments where they have meaning and purpose and connection, they don't use drugs compulsively. The core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because it's too hard or too painful.
I did drugs because of what it did for me. Like, it was my solution. It fixed a lot of shit. Like, it really did. And like, knowing what I know now then, I still would have used drugs because unless I knew another option, which at this point, I still really don't. I'm still going through it. I'm still trying, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Hopefully I do get to that point, but like, I still would have. Like, yeah, I fucking wrecked my life, man. Like, I have nothing. You know, like, I'm homeless, living in the woods, living in a tent, whatever. But like, dude, like, I'm my problem. I don't think drugs are really my problem. Drugs are just my solution. I'm my fucking problem.
But ultimately, it's about belonging and it's about community. And when people get into deep with their disorder, there is the complete loss of community. There's isolation and loneliness and darkness and all of that kind of stuff. And so, yes, if we're going to treat it, if we're going to help people recover, you know, yeah, we need insurance so that we can pay, so that they can go see a specialist, get the medical intervention they need. If they're opiate addicted, they need medication-assisted treatment. They need to see, some of them need to see a clinician, or perhaps because there are multiple pathways to recovery, they need an AA system. They need to go to AA. They need to go to a building where they could receive some definitive kind of intervention. But ultimately, they need to go back home and feel part of a community, and that's where. It's not about money, it's not about financing, that's where it's about people really seeing this as a disease and seeing it that we need to welcome those folks and love those folks back into community as we would, you know, a 15-year-old leukemia patient.
And I have a disease of alcoholism and addiction, and that I can't pick up a drink or a drug because I'm allergic to it. I have a physical allergy, both mental, physical, and spiritual. then you know, like once I can accept that, like I can move on with my steps and take and look at myself and change my life around. So yeah.
I shared, I met Jessica earlier, and we bonded over the fact that we've been in this field since we were 15, involved in youth prevention and substance abuse programs. But I also come to this work with a story similar to Governor Christie's, and that I have a son who's a pediatric cancer survivor. When he was diagnosed, he had a massive seizure at the age of 15 months. Within half an hour, we were in an emergency room. Within 20 minutes, he had a CAT scan. Within an hour, we had a diagnosis. And before my wife and I even had a chance to respond to the trauma of that news, he was in an ambulance, on the way to a specialty clinic. He had his tumor removed in 2 days, and 2 weeks after that, he started treatment. And over the course of the next 2 years, he received chemotherapy that would kill an elephant. My insurance card worked. But if my son was not a 15-year-old pediatric cancer survivor, but was a 13-year-old struggling with alcohol abuse, or a 25-year-old hooked on OxyContin, his insurance card may not have worked. And I may have had to have mortgaged my home, taken a second or third job, made sacrifices to my financial health and the financial health of my family, all because my son was unlucky enough to get the wrong disease. In this country, that's discriminatory, that's wrong, and we can do plenty.
Absent that, what we're doing is gross injustice. Absent that, what we're doing is discriminatory. Absent that, we are just continuing to fail. So I really won't accept much less than that. And I don't think we're necessarily going to get there overnight. But I hope that we're close. I mean, the reality is, it's unfortunate that it's taken this long, that we're now seeing, you know, families torn apart and people dying and just all sorts of insanity that all could have been avoided. But it's here. And if it produces the right conversation to finally push through, I hope that we can deliver a community where those 300 people that died last year didn't die in vain. Sorry. Their deaths need to mean something. They just need to mean something. And that needs to mean something to everybody.
I have no choice but to be involved. Not just me as a pastor, but people that are part of our community from all different types of backgrounds. We know that we have to get involved. We know that we have to be there. We know that we have to feel, you know, and understand what's going on. Our door is about 20 feet from the safe station door in Manchester. How in the world can I sit here and say, oh, we're just gonna do a youth program and prevent kids from going on drugs? You know, no, we can't do that. So I know that we have to be involved, and I hope that as we make these jumps and steps, I think we have some idea of, as I've been learning as much as I can, but I realize that we have to jump in on this because I realize that I have to play a part. I can't just look at it and say, what do we do, or refer. I have to be involved. And I think that if everybody, and this is the thing where we have to think about it, we have to do this regardless of what we get for funding from a municipal entity. We have to do this regardless of a federal funding. We have to do this regardless of what it means for our business objectives or goals. We have to take a season in this community to say, we're gonna double down, we're gonna put our heads together, and we're gonna come up with a plan.
That I've already reached perfection, but I press on to possess the perfection for which Jesus Christ has first possessed me. He says, I'm forgetting what is behind, and I'm reaching forward for what's ahead.
You know, I was talking to the community the other day because a girl came in, and I could feel the shame and the pain just radiating off of her as everybody laughed and made fun of her. Aha, she only made it a couple of weeks. And I just said, you know, we're so trained to be negative. Like, if we can't talk differently about each other as addicts, I don't know how we can expect the rest of the world to do it. I really don't, because that's not funny, it's painful. And it happens to pretty close to 90% of the people that leave here. So you look at one of two things for the women that leave this facility that are addicted to substances. They either don't come back because they're dead, or they come back. And I'm just not sure anymore which one's better. They took things like substance abuse and changed it into substance misuse. And that's just a change in terminology, but I believe that's going to change the stigma of addiction as people start to learn this isn't a choice. And I know that's confusing to people. There's people think it's a disease and people that don't, but I have it, so I know that it is because I don't choose this. I graduated high school, I had dreams, I had aspirations, and today I do again. I can sit here and pout, or I can persevere. And pouting hasn't worked for me yet, so I choose the other.
What was the hardest step laid out in the big book for you?
Just be step one, dude. Because I thought I could control it. I thought that I had a grip on it. I would go to meetings, ask for help, get a sponsor, and I would drink again and again and again. I couldn't get sober, and because I just didn't want to accept that I was a drug addict.
I knew after all my son's friends died that the odds weren't really with him. I turned to my husband and I said, do you think that we should start a funeral fund? Not a college fund, a funeral fund. Well, I found out from one of the Wyndham police officers came to my house. I opened the door and I asked, is it about Zach? And he said, do you already know? And I go, is he gone? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay. And I asked him to come in. You try your best as a parent to protect them as much as you can, but you can't protect them from everything. I don't have any wise advice to give. I just have, where it could be your last time seeing your child, you hug them goodbye. You tell them that you love them.
So yesterday I didn't take any, heroin, obviously, and then today I was kind of craving it, when I woke up, and just because, it's a nice day. I got the day off. I did 3 reasonable lines, I think that this batch that I've got isn't quite as strong as what I've had before, which makes me nervous because, and it's not just my tolerance changing, it is, so, I have to take a bit more, but I don't just want to, do a bunch because of, what happened last time, and, I might take too much, so I just, did, a line, waited, 10 minutes, did another line, waited, 10 minutes, did another line. I'm not a heroin addict, and I think that me, not taking it for a couple of days is pretty, clear. It's been a concern of mine, people, if you're, listening to this, you might be well, this guy clearly has a problem because, he's, pretending he's in control by, not taking it for a couple of days, but, you kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So it's so it's what, you want me to take it every day and that way I won't be an addict, and then I stop taking it and I'm still an addict, so I might pride myself? No. I suppose it's just it's just something I want to do every now and again. And I know that I've been taking it way too much recently, so I'm gonna just, I don't know, I might just cut back or I might just stop taking it altogether. We'll see.
We are in front of 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, getting ready to have our kickoff fundraising event for Safe Harbor, and it's going to be a really exciting night. I send a text to my mom and I just thank her for every moment that she spent loving me and believing me and not giving up on me, and feeling grateful that she doesn't have the story that so many people have right now of losing loved ones, and feeling that I have a chance because someone showed me the power of my story to help other people, to help families, to have those success stories. Isn't that incredible?
It's awesome.
Isn't that incredible?
It's great. I love it.
Oh my gosh. It's really cool, really cool.
You know, the change is amazing. Where her journey, you know, in recovery, and first starting off in, you know, her own self-awareness, and then reaching out and doing prevention work, and then growing into the recovery field. It's just incredible. And to see her passion, I know I would get a little upset.
How long have you been sober? 78 days. 78 days. Is that awesome?
You feel good.
Yeah.
Very
good. Yeah. That's the most amazing thing. And I broke down on my way over here, and it was people are going to get well because of this.
It's great to see years worth of work culminating in someplace real and something tangible that people can come to rely on, you know, to sort of think about. It wasn't too long ago that lots of people were sort of sitting around scratching their heads saying, there's no way out of this, or I don't know what to do, or you know, small groups of people in recovery like Sandi and others saying, you know, there has to be a better way than what we're doing right now. And now there's this sort of physical embodiment of what the solution is. And, you know, while I was here, someone came in off the street and asked to connect and find out more about the program, and took a tour, and is coming back tomorrow. And we may have just gotten somebody right here today on a very different path, all because we collectively made the decision that people matter. And it sort of makes everything worthwhile.
I was always one of those guys that grew up and just said, just stop. As growing up, I didn't have addiction in my life, so I didn't understand it. I was the guy who was like, yeah, you can stop it. You did it. You can just stop it. And the interesting thing is, for the people that are out there trying to establish recovery centers and help people cope and recover and get better and heal, we've got this irrational fear, like you were just talking about, Eric, where well, I want that, I want to help people, but not in my neighborhood. If you're lucky enough to not be affected by it and not lose somebody that you love to this crisis, well, I'm happy for you. But that if you had somebody that was at risk every single day, you might feel differently. There are people that think this. It's when you're out there and you're saving someone's life who's OD'd and using Narcan, that's one thing that's great. When it's the 8th time that first responders have been to someone's house to do the same thing to someone, and they are then not able to go to another call, that's another story. And that also, to me, I mean, I understand where that concern comes from. You must have heard that before.
I was an opiate addict and survived 5 overdoses. Life support, Narcan, the whole nine. So you just never know how that road's going to end up for someone. You know, that person that at the moment's laid out, getting pumped full of life again with a Narcan kit, could end up in recovery and changing his community. It starts with prescription painkillers. For the majority of them, people don't go, you know, pot, alcohol, heroin. They go pot, alcohol, partying, Vicodin, Percocet, Oxycontin. Okay. All of a sudden, you wake up one day and you're suffering from withdrawals because you've been taking these things for too long. You don't even know why you don't feel well. All of a sudden, you realize you have an opiate addiction. Then you keep doing the pharmaceuticals, the pain pills, and all of a sudden you run out of those, or your habit becomes too expensive, and you know someone you knew has already kind of made that conversion into heroin because it's so much more potent and it's so much cheaper and honestly a better high that's the next thing.
The problem, it breaks you down so quickly and so immediately you feel like the scourge of the earth that I mean, you might not want to kill yourself, but like, where does your will to live go? Because it's such a painful, tormenting daily existence.
You know, and then I'm like using it every day because I'm self-medicating, like straight up. Like I wasn't like, I smoked one joint and I was like, I'm gonna go use heroin today because that will make me feel better. Like at all, dude, it happens over time. Like the disease like slowly lures you in, like makes you think everything's gonna be okay in the end, right? And it does that all the time. Don't worry, everything's gonna be okay, and then it destroys you.
This has started to gain a lot of traction this last couple of years. It's gained the attention. We're almost 20 years too late. This started in the late 90s. When I got sober in 2006, if I came out and, you know, because I've been in the treatment industry since 2008 and said, you know, I'm a heroin addict and I'm in recovery, it was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Now it's like, hey, go, buddy. We're rooting you on. You're in recovery. Right. So there's been a shift for a lot of people, not all, in the perspective around that. But it's hard to, it's like a forest fire that started 20 years ago that we're just now waking up to and trying to do something and get it put out.
The bow around this is that when you experience someone getting well and finding recovery from addiction, it's worth it. And when you hear the courage of a family sharing their experience, it's to inspire our communities to step up and to do something. And we can't sit here and wait for the state to fix it. We can't wait for the hospitals to fix it or the schools to fix it. It really is going to take our communities coming together and investing in the solutions, because there's clearly solutions available.
It's a community problem. It's a, sometimes mental health problem. It's a medical problem. And sometimes it can be a criminal justice issue, but I think at the very least in the community level, we need to continue to offer support. We need to continue to be there for these people and help them through it.
Okay, so here we are, Tuesday, May 19th at 8 something. I'm driving to work. I've only had a few sips of coffee so far this morning, so I don't know quite what I've got to say, but I thought I'd make a video anyway. I suppose I just wanted to remind myself that I'm a guy in a suit with a professional job, getting up early and driving to work, because I appreciate like the last few entries that I made last night were of me like stoned and looking like some kind of a junkie. So there is another side to me, but like your 9 to 5 side that I'm pretty responsible with. Yeah, so that's really where I wanted to go with that. I feel like there's so much more that I should be saying, but without my coffee, I'm kind of done. It's bad, isn't it? Coffee in the morning to wake you up, then sort of beer, if not something stronger in the evening to take you back down again. And chat later. Bye-bye.
Fire under control, be clear shortly. Call to dispatch. 901 Agent 127 with a request for police and ambulance. For a 9 Echo 1. Okay. 31-year-old male. Found not conscious, not breathing. Go. Daddy! Daddy! Daddy!
I wish he could come back just for like one day, or just for like, a minute or two. And I'd slap his face and tell him he was a freaking idiot. But that I loved him and do love him still. And at least one bright point is that his death was presumptively extremely quick and painless and without realization. It sucks that he's dead, and it sucks that he died alone. And I'm just trying to take as much comfort as I can from, if it was heroin and fentanyl, that he didn't know. And didn't have any pain.
There's a reason why he filmed himself, and that to me is kind of what troubles me the most. I think he knew maybe it was coming to an end, or saw the light at the end of the tunnel and kind of knew what was coming. He wanted to tell the story so that he wasn't just another person that we were standing over with a Nikon, or another case or another investigation, that he was a person, with a story, with goals, just like everyone else, but somehow along the way got hooked on this and couldn't get off it.
Either he had the drugs on him already, he had already bought the drugs, or he left from our dinner and went and got drugs and went back to the apartment. The police said that they found, several baggies on the table. I never saw them.
It's kind of funny, I was clean from drugs for 2 or 3 weeks, and now I got some, and you're just mad back at it.
Thursday when he came for dinner, he was fine. He was normal. His pupils were fine. He was like the old Danny I hadn't seen for so long. And I asked him, hey, you still doing your drugs? And he said, oh, no, I ran out. And I said, oh, you ran out, okay. You gonna get some more? And he said, no, I don't have any plans to.
I drove to Boston when I scored, and I got some China White. And I stopped on the way back in a bathroom, and I did I don't know. I must have done a couple of 100 milligrams, maybe a bit less, but I took it in my car. Then I got home, I took even more, so I must have taken 350, 400 milligrams, just right up my fucking nose. Oh my God. And I'm thinking I could overdose and die. I don't really give a fuck.
I remember I screamed. I made these noises I didn't know that my body was capable of making. And I ran over to him. It was so clear that he was gone. And I touched his hand, and it was cold.
It's really kicking in. I think that I'll sign off now, but it was good to catch up. And just for the record, it legitimately has been a couple of weeks that I've been clean, and that's pretty cool, right? But I just didn't feel like it tonight. So anyway, good night. Bye-bye.
My memory from that day is so shots of things. He's on the couch, there's the pink bowl, there's the TV with the Netflix, there's the cat. I wasn't taking in the big picture because it was such a shock.
Yeah, that guy cashed your check today. That guy had a smile on his face. He talked to you. You see him every day. It's like us when we go to the coffee shop. I know those people see him every day. Who knows? Or maybe they have issues, but it's a face that we know. These people knew this person. It wasn't just some random dude. He was a member of that community in some way, shape, or form.
What I can promise you is that as a result of what so many people in this room are doing to make this possible, to make this center sustainable in our community, is people are going to start getting well. And we are going to change the headlines on our newspapers and with our media from the devastation that's been hitting our state and others for at least the last 2 years. And we are going to start talking about the solution. We are making the solution bigger than the problem.
I think one reason why the debate about the war on drugs is so charged is because if we're honest, it runs through the hearts of all of us, right? Anyone who has someone they love who has an addiction problem, if you're completely candid, a lot of the time you're really angry with them. And then there's another part of you that is kind of loves them and compassionate and sees that they're in pain. And I think that war on drugs is going on inside the hearts of all of us as well. For 100 years we've been singing war songs about addicts. We should have been singing love songs to them all along. It's the only thing that works.